Hi, and welcome to very special live. This is being done in commemoration of my 1 year anniversary. For those of you who are subscribers, visitors, and viewers, you may be aware of the fact that I did a 1 year anniversary show already, and you can take a look at that if you haven't already after this live. But I'm here doing a special live in commemoration of my 1 year anniversary on YouTube. Now, this live is different from many other lives. Now, as people are aware, this has become a generic channel, so I don't really do content per se. I have a couple of series, the YouTube show, and of course, my movie life. And then there's also the past lives where I deal with a specific topic or issue. Like, for example, they do not seek to be with geeks. That's one of my package lives. Again, special live here, and this one is entitled The Business of Writing. Now, why am I doing a live about the business of writing? Well, very simple. I'm a writer. I've been a professional writer for over 28 years. I was a freelance writer and journalist for 22 years before I retired in 2017. And that's why I'm doing this. But I think the specific impetus for this live came from a live I did last year where uh, I did a live stream talking about writing seminars. We taught a couple of writing seminars, just a couple. Um, and I have about three that I can do for groups and organizations. So I did a live. I just did it as a lark, this live, and I really didn't expect much in the way of views. But the live that I did on writing seminars got more views than I expected, than I predicted, really. And so I noted that. And so that's why I'm doing this live because there seems to be a foundation for this. Now, the business of writing. Why am I discussing beyond the obvious that I'm a writer? Why am I discussing the business of writing? Well, as a writer, I know the business of writing. If I were a broker, I could talk about stocks. If I were a realtor, I could talk about real estate. But I'm a writer, so I talk about the business of writing. Now, there are many writing professions. There are screenwriters, and there are playwrights, and there are novelists, and there are short story writers, and there are poets, various types, technical writers, so forth, freelancers. So the perspective I'm going to approach this from is as a freelance writer, which is what I did. If I were, I don't know, a novelist or if I were a screenwriter, I would take it from that perspective. But this perspective is very specific. So there are different kinds of writing fields and professions. So while there is obviously wider advice here, I'm taking it from the or universal advice to a certain extent. I'm taking it from a very specific point, which is my career and my experience as a specific kind of writer, namely freelance writer. So, when you talk about the business of writing, one of the things that you have to do, or what I try to do, is I try to knock down all the preconceptions, stereotypes, and myths that people will have about writers and writing. So let's deal with the realities of writing as opposed to the fantasies of writing. The first thing that you have to understand, no matter what writing field you go into or writing profession you go into, is that writing is a business. Now, why do I say that? It seems obvious, right? Um, but you would be surprised about the mindset that a lot of people have in regards to trying to be a writer of any sort. They see being a writer as more of an art or more of a pursuit of passion. They see it more as something on an intellectual and, of course, artistic plane. Now, depending on the type of writing that you go into and the kind of writing field or profession you go into, it may be that. You know, if you're a novelist, certainly artistic pursuits have a great deal to do with that, as does writing short stories. But in other types of writing professions, say being a technical writer or being someone who writes speeches, that may not be the case, right? So you have to, as screenwriters say, kill your little darlings. That is, you have to get rid of the things that you like, but that may not work for your script. And that's the same with being a writer. You have to get rid of all of these darlings of yours, these preconceptions, these stereotypes, these myths that you have, right? You have to understand that no matter what writing field or profession you go into, writing is a business. And if you don't understand your form of business, then you will be out of business, and soon it'll be none of your business. So you have to first understand that you're in a business, no matter what you're doing. If you're a screenwriter and you want to write movies, you're certainly in the business. You're in the movie business, but you're in the movie writing business, right? If you are somebody that wants to be a technical writer, you're certainly in that kind of business. So you have to understand it's a business. And so if you're a writer and you want to be a full-time writer or even a part-time writer, you want to you then want to go, well, how do I remain in business? How do you start as a full-time writer and remain a full-time writer? The very basic answer to that is what you have to do is generate cash flow. Now, people have heard the term cash flow in other businesses, right? I don't know, you've probably heard it in regards to real estate, or you've heard it in terms of, retail or whatever, owning a store or owning a warehouse or whatever it is, whatever kind of business you have. Well, in that sense, it's no different for writers. Writers have to be able to generate cash flow. That is, you are in a business, meaning a writing business, no matter what your writing business is. And your business has to be able to generate revenues. And those revenues will turn into income. Thus, you have to generate cash flow. That means that your work has to produce money. And one of the things that I tell people is don't write for free. So let's look at this first T-net here, right? Don't write for free. I don't care what it is that you're writing. I don't care what the project is or what the aspect is, what line of writing, what writing field or what line of writing work you're into. Do not write for free. In 2023, we have an economy that may be going into recession. And if it's going into recession, that means prior to this that there have been high prices, spikes in prices when it comes to food at your local grocery stores, spikes in terms of gas, at the gas station you go to, spikes in all kinds of aspects of residential and consumer life. So if you want to be a writer in 2023, what you have to be able to do is find paying work that will generate monies for you. This idea of writing for free so that you will eventually get a fee, this is something I've come across online. It doesn't work. And even if it does work, this day and age, I would say it's a very bad move. The way prices are and the way wages are for jobs, if you're gonna be a writer, then you need to start making money from the very beginning and continue to make money. Again, cash flow. You have to generate cash flow. Now, I don't like the term cash flow, but it's a term used in business, so I'll use that. Cash flow. What you have to be able to do is you have to be able to generate revenues. And what that means is whatever you're working on, you have to get paid. That's a big deal. Don't audition as a writer. You know what I mean by that? It goes back to what I said about writing for free. People try to write blogs. I blogged, but I blogged when I was retired. This was after 22 years of being paid. Right? It's paid for my work for 22 years. And then I blogged. The reason I was able to blog was, one, I didn't like blogs initially, and I would never have done it if I wasn't. But I did it because I was retired. And I could afford to do it. But don't write for free. Always write for a fee. So remember that. Remember, and I say that in the context of the day and age that we're in, 2023. But this is a rule that you should adapt, period. Don't write, always write for a for a fee. Don't write for free, always write for a fee. You have to understand that once you start generating monies and you get your cash flow going, that means you want to continue doing that. And that will hopefully provide you with the necessity of doing that, right? Hello to the chat. So that's what you have to keep in mind. You have to establish cash flow and you have to continue cash flow. So that's what your priority. So that means never write for free, always write for a fee, right? So I have 3 seminars which I can do for groups, organizations, universities, colleges, etc. And I that deal with writing. It's called the Basic Series. And in one of my seminars, I talk about with every writing project that you do. Again, I'm approaching this from my perspective as a freelance writer and as a journalist, right? With every project you do, you have to determine what I call the point of profit is. Now, what is the point? What do I mean by point of profit? That is, what is the overall amount of money you're going to make on it, and does it generate profit for you? And as a freelance writer, I had to determine, I didn't call this point of profit when I started. It's just a term I've used in my in seminars that I've done. So point of profit is, again, is the amount of money you're going to make, and then whether that amount of money equals profit. And the thing that I've told people in regards to freelancing is, in order to survive as a full-time freelancer, and I was a full-time freelancer for 20 years, part-time for 2, and the 2 was near the end of my career. The way I was able to survive was I had to, every project that I did, I had to generate profit. In other words, every article, every piece, every project I did had to be profitable. Normally, people associate profit in business at the end, right? Because that's what normally businesses are. You know, you either are in the black, meaning profitable, or in the red, meaning unprofitable, right? Possible debt issues. So what you have to understand is, from a freelance perspective, every article, every piece I wrote, I had to determine, would I make profit from it? And that's where your fee comes in. So this gets into another determination, right? So let me just, so again, I'm basing this off my career and my line of work as a freelance writer. So um, so you have to determine that with the project. So I'll give you an example. As a freelance writer, if I'm looking to write for a magazine, right? The magazine has the magazine they're so the magazine uses freelancers, and so their pay for, and it will vary sometimes for certain kinds of articles, but let's just say their general rate of pay or general rate of fee, as I call it a fee level. Their general will be, okay, $300, right? Now, in order for me to be interested in writing in for that magazine, I have to determine, will this $300 be profitable for me, right? Because one of the things, like any other business, one of the things that's good about being a writer, at least for me as a freelance writer, was I was able to work fairly cheap. In other words, I was really able to work, not have to spend a lot of money. Most businesses, they require you to keep spending money, right? If you own a restaurant, you got to spend money on food. You have food costs. You also have other kinds of costs. But when you're a writer, depending on the kind of writer you are, but generally as a writer, what you have to be able to do is minimize your costs. So if you're fortunate, you won't have to really spend a lot of money, hopefully. But it really depends on the kind of writing you're doing, right? So whether you make profit, and again, what do I emphasize? Making profit out of every project, every gig, everything you do. Again, that's my perspective as a freelance writer, but that's what I always tell writers. You have to make money off of everything you write. So therefore, you have to be profitable. Unlike a regular business where profit comes at the end of a quarter or at the end of the year, everything you do is either profit or loss. Okay? So to survive as a freelance writer, every article I wrote basically had to make me money. Because if every article I wrote didn't make me money, I wouldn't have been able to survive. And that, of course, comes in a basic, if you look at it from a basic indice, it comes, of course, from your finance, your expenses in relation to your revenues, right? So if you're spending money in order to get your article done, so okay, we use the example of $300 for this magazine article. Now, if I have to spend money, say I have to spend money to go interview someone, and I pay for gas, that's an expense. Say the gas cost is $10, right? So that's $10 that I spent to drive my car or to drive a car to go see a person that I interviewed for this article. That's an expense for your article. So $10 right there. Okay. Now, say you had to buy a new tape or new tapes for a tape recorder. Oh, maybe people don't do that now. But let's just say that you had to buy a notepad, right? You have your phone, which you use as a recorder because you can record on, I think, most smartphones now. But let's just say that you bought a notepad because, at least from my perspective as a journalist, you also have a notepad. I even have a notepad. It's over there. You can't see, but it's over there. Your reporter's notepad. Let's just say that reporter's notepad cost $2, right? And you did that in the time and space it took to get your article done. So that's $10 for the gas for your car to go to the interview. And then you have $2 for the notepad. So that's $12 right there. Right? Now, if there, now just say that also as a result of this article, that you actually had to fly out somewhere, say somewhere within your state, to go interview somebody else, or go visit an archive or do something that was related to your article. Say you had to fly out, and say that your cost for flying out on airline, say it's a shuttle cost. Say the cost was, I'm speculating here, but let's round it off to $100 for the shuttle cost in order to go visit an archive or do research or whatever, something that couldn't be done online, right? For this $100, right? So now we got the car that costs $10, the gas that costs $10. We have the notepad that costs $2, and we have the airline flight that costs $100. That's $112, and this is for an article that will net you $300. So let's just use those as our itemized expenses and compare it to the amount of money that you're going to get from this article. So you're going to spend, in order to get this article done, in terms of expenses, $112. Now, how much profit would you be able to get if you, from the amount of money, $300, you've spent $112, directly related to your piece, to your article. Those are all direct expenses. What's your profit? Your profit is below. So you write the article, gets published, you get paid, you get the $300. Your profit for that article is below $200. Now, that might work for you because at least you made more money than you spent. But the point in being a writer is this. I don't know if you want to call it the secret to being a writer or just plain common sense. But the secret to being any kind of writer is to spend less and make more. That's what you have to do to survive as a writer. In fact, if you spend nothing and make more, that's the ideal situation. And we're in a day and age that because of technology, because of the internet, because of social media, because of YouTube and various other applications, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, whatever you can use technology to your benefit, right? But the reality in the business aspect, when we're talking about businesses, what did I mention before? Generate cash flow. To survive as a writer of any sort, you have to generate cash flow. So you have to make money and you have to keep making money. And of course, in relation to that, what do you have to do? This is what I call point of profit, which is every gig, every project, every job that you get writing, you have to make money. And you determine that by your expenses on a very basic scale, your expenses versus what you get. The ideal is for you to spend nothing and make everything. In other words, that example that I mentioned to you about, I'll just take this from my perspective, right? If I had, let's just say I was the person that had that $300 article, I'm not going to spend any money. I'm not going to a gas station to pump gas because I won't need it. Hopefully, I won't need to buy a notebook. And I certainly am not going to take a flight. I will spend no money. And so by the time I write my article, send it off, it gets published, and I get paid, I've made $300 free and clear. The key with any kind of writing project or profession is to spend little to nothing in expenses so you can make, largely nearly everything. I mean, this is a rather basic, I consider this common sense, but for some people it's not that common, right? You'll hear the expression, you need to spend money to make money, right? Yeah, you have to do that in most businesses. But unless you really have to spend money as a writer, my advice to you is don't. Find a way not to have to spend money. Find a way to keep your expenses as minimal as possible. That way, everything that when you get paid, you'll be able to keep a larger volume of your revenue, revenues. Now, most businesses talk about, well, you want to keep the expenses down. Yeah, because they have expenses. But as a writer, you have the advantage. You have a way to keep expenses down that most businesses don't. They have inventory and overhead and and labor costs and so forth. And you don't necessarily have that. So those are basic. I mean, I'm dealing with basic business aspects, right? I'm not getting into, I'm not telling you, we're not getting into, what banks in Zurich to keep your money in or whatever it is. No. I'm talking about rather basic business interest, right? The thing I would tell any writer, more specifically freelance writers, is everything you write has to make you money. Everything you write. So don't write for free, right? This is why the tricky part is with novelists, because novelists will write a manuscript and they'll try to get their manuscript bought by a publishing company. And even if they're writing for a self-publishing concern, well, I don't know if they're concerned, even if they're trying to self-publish their work. In fact, this gets into another area. This is a brief area that I'll get into. You know, people over the years used to say, why haven't I written a book? And here's the reason. And I used to give a glib answer like, I can't write because I'm too busy writing, meaning I'm too busy writing articles to write a book, which of course was true. But here's the other reason that I didn't say, or I rarely said. It's because books generally don't make you money. Books are supposed to make publishing companies money. They're not supposed to make authors money. And even if you're self-published, generally your book will not make you money. And this is something people don't understand because they don't understand publishing. And I would tell people sometimes, not rarely, but sometimes over the years, I don't write books because books can't make me money. I write articles because articles have always made me money. And what did I say about that example, right? So, you reduce the expenses and you keep you keep that revenue from that piece of, that specific itemized revenue that you had from that article, right? But articles have always made me money. Pieces have always made me money, right? Because I get paid for the piece. When you have a book, you get your money largely through royalties. If you're a traditional published author, with self-publishing, you're getting them through sales because you got to sell the book yourself, basically, or have somebody hire someone to do it. And the reality is, anytime I wrote a piece for a magazine, I could get paid. But I know I've talked to people who have self-published books, and they're like, "Yeah, my book didn't make me money," because the name is the money you make is largely through royalties, and in self-publishing, it's largely through sales. You got to get out there and sell that book. It's easier for me, therefore, it's easier for me to go approach some outlet, especially in this internet age where you have what I call gig boards now. You go to the sites and you can look for writing work. But the reality is, it's always been easier. I've made my money as a writer not through royalties, but through fees. Because your royalty, you write for a traditional publisher, again, what do you have to wait for? If you have an advance, the advance has got to be paid off when after your book is released. Your advance has got to be paid off. And then you start possibly seeing money, right? You base it on the royalties and with the self-publishing. My view is, when I write articles, I know I can make money because I have. With a book, I have no idea whether I would make money. And also, for me, it's about the deal. I wrote a piece for a site called Honolulu Civil Beat. I think it was called The Art of the Writing Deal, right? And I expressed a little bit of this, like you have to make money off of every. My view was every time you have a writing gig, at least as a freelancer, again, from a freelancer's perspective, every time you have a um, every time you have a gig, that's a deal, right? So your deals have to be able to make you money. That's just the bottom line. But the reality for me has always been, I haven't written a book because I'm looking at what is the best deal. Again, look at the stereotypes. Writers are supposed to be not interested in business. We're supposed to be interested in art. We're supposed to be interested in intellectual pursuits. I'm certainly interested in intellectual matters. But as somebody who was a freelance writer for 22 years, I had no choice but to be involved in the business. And the business, of course, is make profit off of everything you write. Which makes me sound like the Roger Corman of freelance writing. Roger Corman, of course, was an independent film producer and filmmaker, and he used to boast, "Oh, I made money nearly off of nearly every movie that I'd done." So just like I've made money off of every, unless it's something written for free, and there are sometimes I've written articles, what I call a pro bono clause that I add, which is if I feel like writing for a publication, you know, for something just to get a piece published, do it for free. I've done that, but that's like what I call the pro bono clause. Like it's the closest to charity that comes from me. But the reality is, I've never lost money writing. I never lost money. Why? Because I don't spend the money on any gig or project that I'm involved with. So if this gig were to pay me $500, I spend $0. There are no expenses. So by the time this article gets published, I get paid. Made $500. So the volume between your expenses and your revenues, the revenues have to be dominant. The expenses have to be oppressed. In fact, they have to be. If you're really going to survive, you have to eradicate your expenses. Now, you may have continual expenses like internet, for example, right? But that's a continuing, ongoing expense. I'm talking specific itemized expenses per gig, per project, right? So, again, you have to understand. So, when it comes to, oh, thank you, Flowers. Well, again, this has nothing to, I mean, I didn't find anything. I didn't. Here's the thing you have to understand. I just understood the business. When you go into any business, you understand the business. And to understand the business, you have to understand what will make you a profit and what will make you. Now, profit doesn't mean that you'll be wealthy. Look around me. Do I look wealthy to you? No. Right? The funny thing is that it's not about being wealthy. I'm just somebody who made money. When I use the term made money, I don't mean being rich or wealthy or financially lucrative. I mean someone who literally makes money. See, when you work a job, you're earning money. But when you are in business for yourself, I guess I still am, independent contractor, self proprietor, you're making money because nobody's giving you a paycheck. And that's another thing that you have to understand as a writer. If you're a full-time writer in whatever writing field, and the amount of money you make is based solely on what you write. Maybe you have other streams of income coming in, but that's if you're somebody who just writes and you make your money from writing, you have to understand that everything, as I mentioned before, everything you do has to generate profits for you. You have to make money off of everything. That's crucial if you're going to survive. And so the writers that don't survive, the writers that don't make it, are people that are not able to generate profit. They lose money off of every gig, or they're writing for free. And again, I emphasize to people, don't write for free. If you take anything away from this, do not write for free. You can't afford to in 2023. I don't care what project you're involved in. I don't care you're a screenwriter, you're a technical writer, freelance writer, I don't care. You find work that will get you paid and make you money, and you keep doing that. Don't write for free. Don't write for exposure. I hear people talk about exposure. Oh, I want exposure. I'll do this piece and put it out online and I'll get exposure. You know how big the internet is? You know how gigantic the internet is? And you want exposure? I'm on YouTube. I have over 200 subscribers here. Do you think this channel matters when there are literally thousands of channels on YouTube? No. You write one piece and you think you're going to get exposure. You write something on a website and you think you're going to get exposure. You think you're going to write a blog and you think you're going to get exposure. In the elements, in nature, exposure gets you killed. And when it comes to your writing career, if you want a writing career, exposure will get your writing career killed. Never write for exposure and never write for free. Never. Always write for a fee. Always get paid. Always. The only time you can afford to write anything for free, the only time you can ever afford to write anything for free is if you have a paying career. That's how I could afford pro bono pieces, because I'm making money writing for this newspaper or this magazine or this website. I'm a paid writer. So, I mean, I've seen this sort of thing online over the past, I don't know how many years. If there's something that I despise, it's this idea of writing for free. I hate it. It was Harlan Ellison, a writer I always liked. Was a big, well, I'm still a big fan of. He's passed away, but he had a documentary, and you can see this on YouTube. His attitude, it's called Pay the Writer. His attitude is similar to mine. He says, I don't take a piss without getting paid. They always want the writer to work for nothing, meaning companies, corporations, individuals. They want the writer to work for nothing. In the meantime, they wouldn't. They bitch and moan about how much they're paid. Again, get paid if you're a writer. Get paid if you're trying to be a writer. Never work for free. Never. Anybody who's telling you that is either a fool or an exploiter. In other words, they want to make money off of you, or they're just idiots. I have to deal with this kind of attitude online at times. Oh, it's okay to write for free. It doesn't matter. I'll get, no. It just irritates me to no end. Just irritates me to no end. Right? So, in terms of establishing yourself, right? How do you know overall? Because I talked about profit per your gigs, right? Per every project you do and so forth. But overall, how do you determine whether you're in the black or the red or whatever? Okay. Just like any other business, I guess you could say there's startup costs to being a writer of any sort. So the recommendation that I make if you're starting out as a writer, and this is very important, if you're starting out as a writer of any sort, screenwriter, again, freelance writer, screenwriter, television writer, doesn't matter what kind of writer, poet, playwright, short story writer, doesn't matter, novelist. Here's what's important. If you're starting out as a writer, make sure you already have the tools you need. In other words, do not buy a computer. In other words, right. So if you're a writer, I assume you have a computer, right? Something to write with. If you're starting out as a writer of any sort, again, you need the tools that you need the basic tools in order to do that. Don't go out and buy a laptop. If you don't have a laptop, if you don't have a PC, if you don't have the tools, if you have to buy them then of course you're going to buy them. But my recommendation is you should already have the basic tools you need. Why do I say that? Because that's going to cost you money. Remember what I talked about in regards to the expenses? The gas, the notebook, the flight, direct expenses. So your startup cost. If you don't have a computer and you want to be a writer, you go out and get a laptop. Now I don't know what the cost of a laptop is these days. I haven't shopped for a laptop. I haven't looked at laptops in a long time. But let's again. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Let's just say the laptop cost $1,000, right? People can correct me, if they want, but I'm just making roundabout, you know, cost here. Say that the PC cost $1,000. Okay. No, sorry, not PC. Your laptop cost $1,000. Okay. And you don't have. Okay. I don't. Somebody in the chat was telling me laptops are cheaper than the app. Okay, so let's cut that down then. Let's say it's $500. If somebody says you can purchase a laptop for about 400, I'll go to 500. So I'll stick with 500. Okay, say you get a laptop, $500. Okay. You don't have a computer. You want to be a writer of it. I don't know what kind of writer you want to be, but let's just go with freelance writing because that's where I come from. You want to be a writer. That's good news. Like I said, I haven't looked at a laptop. So you want to be a writer. Okay, I don't have a computer. Okay, I don't know if you're a writer. I don't know why you wouldn't have a computer or some kind of device that allows you to write. But okay, so you go out and you buy a laptop for $500, right? That's your startup cost. Okay, you have to understand if you're going to be a freelance writer, you don't have a computer, and you go out and purchase a computer. Guess what? What you paid for that is your startup cost. So $500 startup cost. Okay. You also decide to get tools and equipment, right? So you decide to get like I said, notepad. Say you decide to get a brand new smartphone, right? Your one is run down, and you need one because they have recorders on it. So you have like digital recorders on cell phone, on the smartphones. So you decide to get a new phone. Now I don't know how much phones are. Again, I haven't gotten a phone in a long time or looked at a phone in a long time. Again, I'm making a guess. Let's just say that a smartphone will cost you. Oh geez. I'm not talking a top of the line Apple iPhone or something like that. Just a basic iPhone, right? Say that phone will cost you $150 or something. I don't know. Again, showing my ignorance. I, Jeez, I hate shopping. I'll admit that, right? I never liked shopping. I never cared for shopping. My family had to drag me to mall. They're like, nah, I don't want to go. Hate shopping. It's probably why I'm single, but that's a whole other story. I wouldn't want to have to be dragged out by a wife to go shopping, but that's neither here nor there. So let's just say that phone you got is 150. Now again, I'm get phones for a lot cheaper, but I'm just doing that as a general price. Say that's 150 for smartphone. So that's a notepad. Say the notepad, you got a notepad because you want a notepad. Um, Say you get a couple of notepads this time, right? And they got a sale, you know, buy two, get one cheaper. So let's just say you had three notepads that cost you $6 or $5, right? Five reporters notepads, $5. You got $500 for the laptop. You got $5 for the notebooks. You've got 150 for this new cell phone or iPhone, not iPhone. Yeah, smartphone that you got, right? It's 150. So right away, You add up those, you add up those costs. That's $655, right? 500 for the laptop, 150 for the new smartphone, and $5 for the five notebook, five notebooks, or three notebooks. Sorry, $655. Right. That's your startup cost. So you haven't even produced an article, a manuscript for a novel. You haven't even done anything yet, and you've already spent $655. Now, this is probably not the usual, but why do I cite this? Because, again, the point that I made before, you want to be able to minimize your expenses so that you are able to make profit. Now, as a freelancer, I look at it, you make profit off of every writing project and gig that you do. Okay? So, let me use myself as an example. So, I already told you about this what in economics they call it a widget, which is a non-existent product. So let's just say this person is I call it this widget person that I mentioned, wanted to be a writer, non-existent person. Okay, $655. So I will use myself in comparison. When I started as a freelance writer in 1994, the amount of money that I spent, I can't remember the exact amount, but so I'm giving you a rough estimate. I went to a stationery store and I bought, I believe it was Rima paper, and I got what is that? A couple of couple folders for my clips, meaning clippings. You know, when I was writing for magazines and newspapers, you clip out the articles and you stick it in plastic, right? A couple of those folders. So I did. I believe I bought at least one or two reams of paper, white paper, right? At least either a ream or a couple reams. So there were, and so a couple of those folders. I think I may have gotten a notepad or something like that. And I forget what else. And the amount of money came down to certainly less than $30. And so the ballpark was either about $18 or $19 or in the $20 range, but less than $30, right? Okay. So that was the summer of 1994. My total startup costs, that was my total startup cost. Now keep in mind, 1994 was before commercially viable internet, and that happened. So, so, okay. So I spent less than $30 for my overall startup cost in 1994. This was August, because I started writing in August, right? Maybe, yeah, about August. Yeah, August. So that's where I got. So those are my startup costs, to put it in business terms, right? By the end of the year, meaning the end of 1994, December, I was already in the black. Meaning I hadn't even worked a full year as a freelance writer. And I worked, what? Oh, geez. About over 4 months. 4.5 months. By the end of 1994, I was already profitable. Already profitable. So I was already in the black at the end of FY 1994, meaning fiscal year 1994. It was already profitable. Why? Because my startup costs were low. So if I spent less than $30 as startup cost, a couple, I, it took me basically writing 2 to 3 pieces in order to make up my startup cost. By the first 3 or 4 pieces that I've done, I already met my startup cost. And you have to understand, in the 1990s, the economy was, I don't want to be hyper, I'm not given to hyperbole, but it was 100 times better than the economy is in 2023. In fact, I miss the economy of the 1990s. I'm not a sentimental person. I don't like sentimentality, but I am nostalgic. And I am nostalgic financially and economically for the 1990s because the economy back then was terrific. Absolutely terrific. And I knew it and I appreciated it, but I miss it because I knew my money went further in the 1990s. And I knew, even though I wasn't making fantastic, great money, my money went further. If I could get into a plutonium powered DeLorean and go back to the 1990s, I would. I would. Because my money, the amount of money I have on me now, I don't want to talk about that, but the amount of money I have on me now, well, I can live very well. I can live pretty well. Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, I miss the 1990s. Oh, I miss the economy there. Sorry. I'm getting nostalgic. I'm sorry. I apologize. But um, again, what's the point? With your startup costs, you got to keep them low if you can. Don't spend what you have to spend. Keep them very, very low. If you're going to be a writer, keep them low. You don't want to be, what was the example I said? $655. That's the theoretical example. Now, $655. Let's take the widget guy, as I called him, right? $655. Now, how do you make that up? Now, say that guy's intending to be a freelance writer. How do you make that up? He would have to get pieces that will, on average, that will pay him $100 per article, at least, in order to pay off his initial startup cost, right? So he can't sell for stuff that you see on Craigslist. $50 to buy, or $75. No, got to make more money than that, right? He needs to make at least $100 per article, minimum, if he's got a shot at trying to pay that off in time. So the pieces that he gets have got to be able to generate enough revenue so that's taken care of. And he can move on. The bigger your startup costs, the bigger an obstacle financially will be for you to become a writer and stay a writer. Because you will be saddled with the D word, debt. And you don't want to be in debt as a writer. Trust me, you don't want to be. And we're at an age where you can go on websites and you can find work. I'm not talking Upwork, Elance, and Fiverr and all that pablum. So, see, people don't understand, well, how were you able to retire? That's a whole other story. Well, retirement's a whole other story. But I was able to retire over the years because, one, I didn't have debt. I don't know if I should talk about that, but I didn't have debt. So before I became a freelancer, and that's another thing. This is one thing I talk about writers in regards to business. This is probably one of the most, this sets me apart about everyone else. Now, again, this isn't a writing channel. I'm not here to talk about writing per se, and I'm not here to, again, I have my official channel, which is Writer Albert Lanier, and even that's not a writing channel. It's just my official channel, and I do other things there. But here's the point that I make about debt. And I don't hear a lot of people who do writing channels here on YouTube or who have writing videos. They don't talk about this for whatever reason. I don't know. What I tell people who want to be writers of any sort is this. What is your level of debt? You got college loan debt. You've got credit card debt. You've got other kinds of, say you had a business before and you have still business debt or whatever, but whatever your debt level is, and you want to be a full-time writer or even part-time writer, the one thing that I caution writers is this, or people who want to be writers is this. Don't get into any form of writing unless you have found a way to minimize your debt and reduce your debt. And I don't hear people on YouTube telling this to writers or telling this to potential writers or aspiring writers. The reason that I was able to become a freelance writer for 22 years is because I had zero debt. Let me repeat that. I was able to become a freelance writer, remain one, because I had zero debt. So that means when I came out of college, no debt. When I started my freelance writing business, no debt. The only time debt works is if you're in for business reasons. Like you're in real estate or you're in some, other kind of business where you can buy properties and buy entities and buy companies. And those companies and properties have to be able to generate income and generate revenues. That's the only time debt works is in business. Personal debt doesn't work. Other kind of debt doesn't work. Excellent. Excellent. I think it's Flowers in the chat. Lady called Flowers says she has zero debt. If that's true, congratulations. You're in a very good position. You're in the perfect position to begin to become a writer. Now, most people can't be zero debt. I understand. But if you're going to be a writer of any sort, don't enter writing fields and professions if you're saddled with debt. Because you have the burden as a writer to what, as I mentioned before, generate income, meaning generate revenues. You can't do that if you've got $50,000 in debt. Now, that may be extreme, but you got $50,000 in debt. If you're starting as a full-time or part-time writer, even if you make money, half that money at least, if not most of it, at least a half of it, maybe a good portion of it's going to what? Service the debt. You're paying off your debt. That's why I always tell people who, and my advice is probably controversial, but I tell people, don't become a writer if you're in debt. If you've got a massive amount of debt, I'm sorry. Being in a writing field of profession isn't for you. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I'm being realistic. You've got to get that debt under control. You've got to do it because you're hurting yourself. Remember what I said before. It comes to the business of writing in general. What do you need to do to remain a writer? Generate cash flow. How do you do that? What you write has to be able to be profitable. So every gig, every project, everything you work on has to be able to generate revenues and thus income. Right? So if you're generating revenues and it gets into income, you're what? Producing cash flow. And you're keeping the cash flow going. Every gig you do, every writing gig you do. Project. And again, I'm speaking to people who are going to be part-time and full-time writers. And that's it. I'm kind of narrowing this. I'm not even taking into account other streams of income from other businesses or other jobs or anything like that. I'm talking about solely you're working as a writer. Okay? So they can focus on that. I tell people, don't become writers if you've got massive debt. Don't become writers if you've got significant debt. Reduce the debt. You got to do this. You don't want to try to be a novelist if you've got $35,000 in loans and maybe $5,000 in other forms of debt, $40,000. You got to find a way to reduce that. I'd say, let's say $35,000 is your total. It's 40,000, but let's just go with 35,000. If you got $35,000 in debt, you got to reduce that to, in order to be a writer, I would say reduce that, try to reduce that down to about 10,000. And then maybe you got something to work with. You want to make sure that you're on stable financial and economic ground when you become a writer. Here's what people don't know about me. I shouldn't announce this, but I will. I have zero debt. Nothing. Nada. Bupkis. Zip. Niente. Nada. Nothing. So anything I do will automatically be profitable for me in terms of writing. Again, you have to understand that it's about making money. We're not talking about being if you want to be a millionaire or billionaire, go invest in real estate. Go into high tech. Go into, I don't know, stores, creating stores, warehouses, stuff like that. Don't become writers if you want to be a multimillionaire, right? Like being a freelance writer, I think the top level of freelance writers financially is 100,000 or over. That's a top level for freelance writers. I'm talking to people who are interested in writing and being writers. Get that debt level down. Because I don't hear this talked about on YouTube. I don't hear people talking about, you got to reduce your debt. You got to do that. Don't become a writer if you've got thousands of dollars in debt. Please don't. Life is hard enough in this economy. Life is hard enough as it is. You don't need to try to be some kind of screenwriter or TV writer or poet or playwright or novelist or short story writer if you've got thousands of dollars in debt. I don't care if it comes from an MFA program where you went to grad school, or it's undergrad if you went to college or university. I walked out of college with no debt. I'm not going to talk too much more about that, but that's when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I had no debt. Zero. I could do whatever I want. But college debt is a big issue. Please reduce the debt. Again, I can't be more serious than this. People go on YouTube and they think it's entertainment and fun and games. This isn't fun and games. Please do not become a writer if you've got thousands of dollars in debt. You're doing yourself a disservice. And if that irritates, if that offends people, I don't really care. But do yourself a favor. Get that debt down before you write. Because trust me, it's hard to be a writer, even if you're successful. And I was successful, modestly successful, before at least of the 22 years. I survived for 22 years. And I was successful for most of those years. But it's hard. It's not easy. Look at it from a standpoint of an airliner. When an airliner takes off, can there be a lot of stuff on that runway? Debris, clutter? No, it's got to be clear. And if you're going to be a writer, what you want is a clear runway that you can take off from. That means reduce that debt. So we've reached the end of this, and I've talked about some aspects of the business of writing, and I expressed them from my perspective. Again, we're dealing with the business aspect. And I haven't gotten into all the aspects relating to business, but these are some of the basic ones. So let's try to go over some of them before I end this. Number one, and not necessarily in order, but in terms of importance, let's look at startup costs, right? When you look at your startup costs, you want to be able to have low to no startup costs as a writer. So the less you spend, the better off you'll be, right? I gave you an example. I called it a widget guy, like economics widget. So this guy spent $655. including buying a laptop and buying a new phone, record stuff on, $655, right? Whereas I contrasted myself, I spent less than $30. Startup in 1994. So by the end of 1994, I was already in the black. And I hadn't even worked an entire year yet. I hadn't worked an entire year. I just freelanced for 4.5 months. 4.5 months. I was already in the black. So I was already profitable in less than a year of freelancing. And when it comes to profit, how do you attain profit? Everything you write, so you start out with this, everything you write has to be profitable. So you start out with low startup costs, right? Low startup cost. Second aspect is you get the gigs, projects, writing work. Everything you do has to have a point of profit, which comes from one of my seminars, right? Point of profit, which means that it has to be profitable. And so how do your gigs, how do your projects become profitable? Well, much like with the startup cost, your expenses are lower. Okay? So notice it's almost like, you know, notice the kind of tethering and connections that you see here. Yeah, start off with your startup costs, low to no, I would say, and then you, and then, and then you start working, and you make sure you have you make a profit. Not only do you get paid, you make a profit off of every gig that you do, and in order to make profit on every project or writing gig that you do, you have to be able to have few, if any, expenses per the project, per the gig. So the less money you're spending in order to get the gig done, the more money you're going to end up clearing and making, right? And in order to make that profit, in order to make money, guess what you shouldn't be doing? Writing for free, right? Writing for free. Because if you decide to give the store away, guess what? The store will eventually close because you're not generating revenues. You're not, thus not producing income. And you're not producing, what did we say before? Or what did I say before? Cash flow. I don't like the term cash flow, but I use it because it does, I mean, it is a business term. The point of becoming a writer and staying a writer from a business perspective is the generation and regeneration of cash flow. And that comes from being able to get paid, don't write for free, and make a profit out of every gig, project, and work assignment, any writing project or gig that you do, or job that you do, right? Notice the connections there. And the last thing that I will note is, in order to make the startup, in order to be able to work and make a profit, in order to keep your expenses low, in order to keep that profit and thus make money, what will benefit you is not having a huge debt burden or a big debt burden. You reduce the amount of debt you have before you become a writer. And so that's been the business of writing. I know this is not something I normally talk about. I don't talk about writing. I don't talk about being a writer. Um, Again, I have an official channel, which is called Writer Albert Lanier. Uh, that's basically kind of different content. Used to be a writing channel, but it's basically what? Movies, and I think the series there are movies and true crime. I might do a couple of writing things there, but I kind of revamped it. Maybe I'll do like a package live about, or package lives there about writing. We'll see. But again, I don't normally talk about writing here. I don't discuss my background or my work or whatever it is. So this is again a special live, really in commemoration of my 1 year anniversary of this channel. I hope the live was informative. Again, the emphasis here on this channel is information, factuality and actuality and information. So I hope this was informative. I hope it helped some people. We'll see what the reaction to this live is. Again, my live that I did last year on writing seminars got more views than I expected. So again, thank you for watching. And if you're an aspiring or new writer, put some of these aspects into account now. All right, thank you so much. Take care, folks.